What's going on? Donate securely.
CatholicCommunityRadio.org.
CatholicCommunityRadio.org. WPYR.
Baton Rouge.
Catholic Radio.
For your community.
From the Catholic Underground.
Today on the show, Marching for Life, making your own textbooks, tats for the insolent resistance community, getting our time straight, liturgical time, our picks of the week, and so much more. The Catholic Underground starts right now. Put your hand on the YouTube. It is time for the Catholic Underground, your weekly Catholic guide to the digital continent. It's episode number 284. If you can believe that, I can. I'm Father Chris Decker. If you are listening live, you can join us at CatholicUnderground.tv and get your chat on with us. Joining me this week, as always, Father Ryan Humphreys, rector of the Minor Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in historic Natchitoches, Louisiana, joins us. Hello, Father.
Hello, world.
Also, Kathleen Lee. She is the kind of tired campus minister at St. Michael the Archangel High School in Baton Rouge. She's our fully licensed faith ninja. Hiya!
Hiya, for sure.
Jeff Blackwell is the technical director of the CU. He's the commandant of the Jeff Star 1 near-Earth orbit satellite. He joins us, as he always does, here on Earth. Hey, Jeff.
Playing air drums.
Somebody's got to do it. Somebody does. And, of course, Katie, the cat lady, for all the right reasons, Richard, is on the video feed.
Katie.
Yeah, it's okay. Katie's yelling at me from the video production room, but I got to say it's basically cat gifs. She sends animated cat gifs to all of her priest friends.
Okay.
Which I suppose is cleaner than having a house full of cats.
Yes.
Because you can have lots of images as long as you organize them. I think you're okay, right, Father?
Yeah.
Yeah, organization is the key to all happiness, joy, goodness, pleasure, and really anything important.
Spoken like a true obsessive compulsive. Thank you, Father.
Yes, you're very happy. Welcome.
There you go.
So my question, Father Ryan, is how did an OCD guy like you enjoy the March for Life in all of the organization that takes place to put one of these things on?
I had a temporary lobotomy, and it worked out really well.
It was Valium, wasn't it, Father?
No, it was more along the lines of just, some Holy Spirit, if you're going to have to just turn off everything that is Ryan Humphreys for the next 3-4 days.
Wow.
And it worked out very well. We brought about 45 kids and about 7 adults. So we rented one big bus. We made the trip. We drove overnight, and we did what we called a warrior trip. So we did not stay several days. We did not do a lot of sightseeing. We got there. We were there on the ground in D.C. for only about 30 hours, and then we were back in the bus.
Wow. So basically, the whole thing was a red-eye trip.
It was all red. We left Tuesday noon, and we got back Friday noon. And we had 40 hours of driving on the bus in between there. But it was a warrior trip. We wanted to get our feet wet and kind of have an experience so that next year we can do a better job and start tweaking and getting to where we want to be. And it was remarkable. Even and of course I called roll constantly, but that was as OCD as it got. The rest of it we just kind of let it happen, and it was very cool. Very cool.
And that's so this is you're in the nascent stages of developing a March for Life program, whereas over in the Diocese of Baton Rouge, Kathleen, this is several years running now.
Yeah, I think we're on year. I know it was my year 7. I think it was year 8. It was year 8 for us. So it's been established by one Peter Fletcher, who's now of the Diocese of Lafayette, and has been passed down to me and Deacon Brad Doyle and Ryan Halford.
Oh, that's right. Wow. These are all Baton Rouge names and Lafayette names that you don't know.
Yeah.
But now you do know them, and so welcome to the Catholic Underground. You'll hear a lot of names that you don't recognize from Kathleen. But so y'all didn't just go on one bus.
No, we took 9 this year.
Wow.
9 whole buses. We have gotten insanely up to 11 buses. Never again shall the two meet.
It's a lot of buses.
That's a lot. It's a lot. But
it's a fleet, actually.
Yeah. We had 9. We traveled in a couple of 4 bus groups. So it worked out pretty well, except for we had one bus, our bus number, lucky number 5, that just, broke down at Hanceville. We had to leave it in Hanceville. We left everybody on the bus in Hanceville. They were my bus buddy. At one point, I had to go in and be like, so, we're going to go.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and go.
Yeah, and they were about 6 hours behind us, that first day. But
wow, So the real question, Kathleen, why? Why do this?
Why do this? You know, somebody asked me that question when we were in DC. You know, for our kids, I think we live in Louisiana. We are the most pro-life state, and so I always thought that, you know, this is what it was. This is what it was like. You know, that everybody everywhere was pro-life. So, but it's not that way. So to go to DC and see that there's a bigger movement, that there are people from all over the United States who believe, who think the same way we do, and not necessarily religious people, but people, you know, who believe in the dignity of life. And what's great about our trip is it's been built as a pilgrimage. And so from the moment we get on the bus to the moment you get off, we're not only talking about, you know, abortion, we're talking about euthanasia, death penalty, you name it, genocide. We're talking about these life issues. And what does society say about the dignity of life? And what does that mean? You know, especially, you know, in even little ways for our students, like, how do you see people not their dignity not being upheld in your school every day?
That's right.
It doesn't need to be an end of life issue, but it needs to be a dignity of life issue.
I was listening to the radio today, and there was an interview on NPR about nuclear war and how it becomes acceptable. And one of the things that the commentator was saying was that it becomes acceptable to eradicate another person when we find a way to dehumanize them. If we make them into an object, then we can immediately, almost without even thinking, say that it is okay to destroy them. And I think that that the pro-life movement, in all of its forms, as you say, not just the unborn, but in that wider scope, that March on Washington helps us not only as Catholics but as a country, and I would even say as a world, to recognize that there are humans who respect the rights of other humans, even if they are unborn, even if the world has cast them aside. Father Ryan, the numbers were big this year.
Well, the last time I went, which has been about 3 years, it was 450,000 people. And this year, they said the estimation based upon the people who do this kind of estimation was a little over 700,000. And and of course, they changed the route this year, which made it so confusing for people who had their place. You know, people always go to the same place. And so I went to the place I had always gone before and found myself at the very beginning of the march, which was chaos because, I mean, that's where all the really like intense groups, the group next to us, which was like 500 strong, had a dozen cheers. And before I knew it, one of my cheerleaders was in the middle of their group with the bullhorn leading them, and I was, Sarah Kay, get out! Come here.
She had been drafted. She drafted herself.
Oh, she drafted herself. But the sheer numbers were astounding. Like we all got to the people at the front. We did the march, went up there. We were at the steps of the Capitol. We spent about 15 minutes just kind of waiting, and then we went ahead and walked back to the bus. And we walked almost a mile because we didn't want to do the bus pass thing because that means sitting in line for a day. And we walked back to where we were going to meet our bus, and the entire mile we walked, there were still people coming, and it was insane how big, how long, how full the march was, and how many different groups. But the thing that blew me away, Father, and Kathleen, you may have noticed it too, the lack of crazies. I mean, there weren't your usual. Usually on the march, we look over and you've got this one who's showing disgusting pictures, and this one who's screaming hysterically, and and other than the one guy who had the big video screen showing the nasty pictures, there was really no crazies there. And I don't know whether that was the Holy Spirit or whether it was police or what, but it was a better march. At least I found it was.
I agree. You know, and every year we prep our kids that you may run into people who don't agree with you. And we only had one run-in like that. We prayed outside of Planned Parenthood, and this guy came up, and it was that's one of my I'm a words of affirmation person, so I don't do well when people yell at me. And I wanted to die, the things he was saying. But it was such a moment. Like it's one of my most uncomfortable moments of the whole march. When you go and you put yourself out there in front of Planned Parenthood, and people, you just open yourself up to people who are, who are going to yell and be nasty and disagree with you. And this guy was totally nasty. I mean, he dropped all kinds of words, and the kids, it was beautiful because the kids just put their heads up. And they kept on praying. And they were like, this is what, because we had told them, like, it's all about love. It's all about, what are we here to do? What is our mission? To pray, to love, and the kids without hesitation.
Yeah.
That to me is the coolest thing that these kids experience, opposition or uncomfortableness or whatever.
Yeah.
And how they react to it without a lot of prodding from us.
And that's the thing, too, when the cause is just and the cause is true, you are able to be Christ at the Praetorium. You're able to be Christ standing near Pilate before all of the assembled people.
Yeah.
And you're able to stand there and reflect
Yeah.
he who is true.
Yeah.
And you're able to do it in a way that shows that you have dignity and that you're standing for those who do not have the benefit of having their dignity recognized. And that's really what Jesus did when he stood there and whenever Pilate said, "Behold the man." He said so much in those words, even though he wasn't aware perhaps that he said it. And as Jesus stood there with the reed in his hand, being mocked as a king, he looks out to the people and he says, "Behold you who will be saved." He didn't say that in scriptures, but that's essentially what he's doing, is I'm showing you your dignity by standing here. So how awesome.
Yeah.
What
We had a really cool reflection because in front of this particular Planned Parenthood, they put up like this garden to kind of detract people from standing. And we've checked with them, with the city, and we can stand there and all this kind of stuff. So you have to kind of climb into this garden. And one of our students, we're reflecting on it. She said, I wasn't excited about this. I wasn't happy about it. But as I was climbing through the garden, I realized that it was all rose bushes. And she said, and they were catching, all the thorns were catching on.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, she said, this was my crown of thorns.
Wow.
So she's like, Jesus stood without hesitation, without a word, and stood for what was right. And she said, this was my crown of thorns. And I was like, what? And it's those moments where it's, I may be exhausted and it may be crazy, but those are the moments where I'm like, man, like it's not me. It's not anybody who organized this trip.
Right.
When we talked a lot this past week about the quiet whisper that God speaks to us.
Yeah.
And he did in so many ways, in talking about that guy who was yelling, did Jesus speak to them in a quiet whisper? Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anything, Father Ryan, that really struck you about this year?
Well, I've always gone to the vigil, which is a big effort because it's a very difficult march. This year we had about 500 seminarians, about 500 priests, about 150 deacons.
Always so awesome, though.
Yeah,
Boy,
it's incredibly moving, and we had about 60 bishops and 6 cardinals, and it took 45 minutes to get everybody in the sanctuary. Of course, I got to walk next to Father Andrew Apostoli in procession, which was pretty cool.
Neat.
I'm busy reading his book right now, and there's the man next to me, and I'm going, what? So that was cool. But Cardinal O'Malley actually gave a really good sermon. The Mass was long, of course, it always is, but he gave an incredibly good sermon giving all kinds of data about how we're winning, how success is taking place, in the battle for hearts, but also in the battle for legislation. And it was an incredibly good experience. So I think that vigil was really good. And, of course, seeing my kids get back on the bus saying, we can do so much better here. We can do this, we can do that, we can do the other. That was really what we wanted to see. I wanted kids coming back going, we're starting a group, right when we get back, it's going to be called the St. Mary's Lifeguards, and we're going to blah, 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 blah.
Nice.
And I said, this is cool. I said, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. And so, I was excited because what we wanted was a year one that got people excited, that had some struggles and difficulties, and that made them feel like they wanted to take responsibility and authority, and that's exactly what happened. So thanks be to God. That's what I wanted.
Yes, indeed. And that's really what all this is about. It's not just solidarity, but it is so that that we might witness to those, especially to our young, that it's not just marching for the sake of marching, but it's marching so that hearts can change.
Yeah.
So that the world can change in that sense. So very, very cool. Let us know maybe some of what your stories were. Backchat@CatholicUnderground.com is the way to do that. And of course, you can always keep glued to the Catholic Underground, because whenever there's a March for Life, well, somebody's going to be going and we're going to be covering it. So you're listening to the Catholic Underground. It is, in fact, the Catholic Underground, your weekly Catholic guide to the digital continent. We are online at CatholicUnderground.tv. I am Father Chris Decker, your humble host. Of course, that probably makes me a prideful host for saying that. Father Ryan Humphreys joins us via Skype. Jeff Blackwell joins us via right there. And Kathleen Lee is to my left. You're right.
Here I am.
There you go. Our picks of the week are coming up, as they always are. But first, we want to talk about Amazon because we tend to talk about it quite a bit. But there's a new thing. There is a textbook creator for Kindle, and I am rather excited about this. I didn't know anything about this, Father, until I saw it in the show notes today. I know about Apple's iBooks author, so that you can make books for the iBook store. And in fact, I was thinking about it the other day, how awesome it would be if Kindle were to come out with the same thing, because there are things that I would like to make into a book, if not for myself, but maybe for others. And lo and behold, I thought it into existence.
By sheer force of will.
That's right.
Oh, my.
I poured myself a cup of really hot tea, and then I put the electrodes in the tea, and before you knew it, it appeared out of thin air. Yeah.
Well, you would remember back in 2011, we had the same discussion on Catholic Underground about iBooks author and how it had the potential to change everything. Because before that, you had Lulu and you had CreateSpace, but there wasn't a good way to make a really good ebook that could be distributed well. Unfortunately, iBooks author has never really caught on. You've had some people who've created some things. They've been interesting, but there's never been that breakthrough product. Now Amazon is stepping into the fray with a very, very similar product, but they're launching on Kindle, which is a much better platform because it's not just iOS, it's everything. And so it's exactly what you'd expect it to be. They're using a service called Kindle Direct Publishing, which allows you basically to put what you want into this. They really are focusing on textbooks and not books in general. But it looks to be a very, very simple way for a teacher or a college professor or anybody really to put together a long or a short textbook either for free or for profit, and to make it easily accessible to anybody who wants it. They can put it on any device that runs the Kindle app. So whether you're talking about your Kindle Fire, your iPad, your TV that has Kindle built into it, anything like that is all there. And so it's a remarkably cool thing, and it looks like it's going to be very, very easy and should be coming out. It's either out today or it'll be out tomorrow.
Wow. I'm just thinking of all the possibilities. You know, we probably talked about this when we spoke of the iBook author, but I know, Father, the first thing I always think of when I think of this realm is our theology professor, Monsignor Terry Teacat, may he rest in peace, who was trying to put together an e-textbook, and it was a big, long HTML page.
I got a B+.
And
Wow.
Father Ryan got a B+ for doing all of the work instead of an A-.
All the work for the entire semester. No, but I mean, we put together this massive, epic website when really the better solution there was a student could release, our teacher could say, make a textbook for your project. Put together an entire textbook, maybe not, a 1,000-page job, but say, what are you going to do? Put together a textbook for little kids. How is that different from one for fourth graders? And it's a good project, and it's not hard to do.
No, not at all. And that's these authoring pieces of software generally make it very, very effortless. Ryan in the chat room says, my idea for a textbook, how to make a Kindle textbook, which I think is golden. You could sell that for 99 cents and retire to Belize.
Huh. Have you been to Belize?
No, nor have I been to Bahia, Donald. But now there's an obscure reference for you, but you're welcome.
Okay.
So yeah, this is a really neat thing, and I think I might have to download it. So is there a market for this? I mean, for just everyday Jeff Catholic to use this Kindle Direct Publisher thing? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, is this like you can create your own textbook, right?
Yeah.
Because I know that, like, working in a school, we've had issues with people, with publishing companies. Like, it's almost like they jump the gun with their textbooks, and they
especially
put them
if it's on
for like
format.
e-reader, and they're horrible. I mean, it's it's like reading. You can't highlight or anything, and it's like. The formatting is just awful.
Yeah.
And so it's
basically
been hard.
They just text dump.
Yeah, it's like
a
PDF, but you can't interact with it or anything like that. So I mean, I would be interested to see how people are reformatting or using user-friendly formatting to do. And I think at least for the next 10 years or so, I think that text as schools are getting tech savvy.
Yeah.
They're going to be looking for easy to use textbooks. From a reliable source. I still don't think we are at a point where we're ready to go off
paper.
Off of this. Well, to have a textbook is such a reliable source. Instead of going to a website or you don't really know who So I think at least for the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, there's something about the printed page. Those monks knew what they were doing. There was something
Yeah.
about the printed page to me that is stable. There's something stable about that. You don't have to worry about it breaking down, not having battery. It's always
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things that I found really interesting, because I happened to be looking for a textbook the other day, because I'm always interested, especially in the realm of television, what television textbooks are out there. Because for the longest time, Jeff, you might know this, having done a little bit of broadcasting, but there are like 4 standard television production textbooks that have been out forever. And I said, well, maybe if there's an e-version of this textbook, it'll be cheaper.
Yeah.
Nothing doing.
Really?
Yeah, the textbook, the television production textbook that's been updated is like $200 and something bucks,
Yeah.
and the Kindle app is like $195, or the Kindle book is $195, or you can rent it for, $50 or $60. But it's amazing to me. I would rather pay $250 for a textbook that I could keep rather than $195 or $200 for ones and zeros.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Well, the thing that raises my question is about textbooks generally is it used to be a real giant pain in the butt to print something that
Yes.
looked like a textbook. So you had to go with Macmillan or HarperCollins or whoever. This kind of market allows anybody to make a textbook.
Yeah.
And just like the horror that was the early web design, just like the horror that was print, desktop printing, if you say, well, I've got a textbook here in some area, like how to make a Kindle textbook,
Yeah.
how do I know it's trustworthy?
Right.
Or is this just like a blogger who had an extra 2 hours and put it together? And I guess the big struggle is, for now, there's still a certain amount of value in a textbook from a company.
Yeah.
And certain things are always going to need a textbook. Epidemiology or, some are combinatorics. You're always going to need a textbook for
Any
it.
of those things.
But I think there are certain categories where you start saying, especially in the high school market, where you say more and more, I wonder whether textbooks are going to be a thing. So it just makes you wonder, is the e-textbook really a thing any more than the print textbook? Because for some categories, I think, especially things like history and stuff, it's almost better just to say, buy this person's book, read it.
Yeah.
It's not a textbook. It's just it's a nonfiction book.
Right.
And I'm wondering more and more whether that combined with YouTube, combined with Wikipedia, are going to become kind of replacement for textbooks. But I don't know, it's an interesting thing. I think the program is really good.
Yeah.
It makes me ask the bigger questions.
And that's where iBook really had it neat, because I've used iBook Author, and you can add in all of the video links and everything to make a real interactive book. But I think you're onto something, Father, with who's telling the truth in this textbook. Yeah. Normally, if you have a textbook, that it's trustworthy generally.
Well, I know when you've studied epidemiology extensively in the past, or in combinatorics,
Oh yeah, all of those things.
The 2 most random topics I could just came straight out of my brain.
I love
What
it.
do you do?
That's nice.
Those books smell of leather and mahogany. Those books there. So about 4 years ago, we discussed an idea in development about a temporary tattoo that would read blood sugar so diabetics don't have to draw blood. The little pinprick on your finger.
Yeah.
It seemed like a really cool idea, but now, it's a reality.
Booyah.
Yeah. I know. In fact, our video director, Katie, is already checking her pager, so that she can, because she's got the little pump, you know. Am I supposed to say that? Okay, I can say that. Good. All right, because I did. It's on live TV. Anyway, and so how awesome would it be to be able to just kind of scan the barcode or whatever? And Father, this is real now.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not exactly where we wanted it to be. The one we had discussed was a tattoo that was printed on the arm, and then you would use your infrared, use your camera phone, and it has an infrared channel on it. You'd take a picture, and based upon the color, and the app would be able to determine with extreme accuracy, within 1 or 2 points, what your blood sugar was.
Wow.
This one is not that, but that required a needle. That required a tattoo.
Okay.
This is a temporary tattoo. It's a sticker that tells you if your blood sugar is spiking or not. They're working on one that will be able to actually have a readout of a number, but that requires more power.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Scotty is simply not available, and so they're working on doing it. And as the electrodes come along, but what they've got here is a functional working prototype of something that can do the work. Now it's just a function of tweaking it to make it do all the other stuff. The current version they have only lasts for a day, but they can produce it only for a few pennies, and so you really can just put on a new one every day, and then if your blood sugar's up or down. And of course, as they say, in just a couple of years, they should have one that should be able to tell you, right now my blood sugar is 115, I need to eat something, or right now it's 260, I need to take a breath, and stop.
Father Ryan, I'm receiving a text message from the video production room. Who is the maker of this? Do you know who it is?
There's an article in the show notes
we'll
that
put
Jeff
that
is going to
article
point us to later on.
That's right. So to the video producer who might be wondering about this by a text message during a live show, you have to check the show notes. No freebies here, folks. No.
I think Jeff is the one who usually points us to the show notes.
He does.
Jeff, you ready? Go.
Yeah. And if you're interested in this and want to find out more, how can we do that, Father? Just
Go to the show notes.
Go to the show notes at CatholicUnderground.tv.
It's a silly evening, folks.
What he said. Yeah, this is really good. It reminds me of the little strip that you could put on your head that would tell you your temperature.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that as a kid, Kathleen?
No, I didn't. I had that one time in Mexico. I woke up with 102 fever.
And you woke up with that thing on your
a
head.
sticker on my head, and I was like, "What is going on?"
¿Qué es eso?
I'd never seen it before, but I thought it was phenomenal.
Eso es el temperatura.
That's what happens. You eat too many burritos, you end up with a sticker on your head that tells you your temperature.
That's right.
But no, I think this is great. I mean, I myself, I am also a diabetic. What? We're like taking over the show.
Wait a minute.
But I think it's great because I know so many people don't medicate themselves because it's a pain. Literally,
It's a lot of work.
it hurts. Like you callus your hands. If you have to inject yourself with insulin, it's not pleasant.
And if you play the guitar.
Yes. Hello.
She does. I don't.
Wow.
I don't play the guitar.
So and I myself for a long time was like, forget this. I'm not poking myself 6 times a day. Like you can forget it. So I think this is great. I think it's going to be great for people who can't afford a lot of diabetic, all the diabetic stuff. You got to, things and tabs and all kinds of doo-doo. Like if you can't afford it, those who just don't want to do it, especially the elderly, right? I think this will be great.
Tim the Sim, seminarian intern, soon to be clinical pastoral intern, wants to know, will this thing sync with the iWatch and the iPhone? Tim, you can bet it will.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll probably be able to use near-field communication to touch it to your phone and probably, do something amazing.
Well, there's actually a couple of apps for the iWatch that are trying to simulate this kind of thing based upon the connectivity the watch has with the electrical signals in the hand.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't have the same accuracy, but you could imagine that in a year or two, sort of the same way it took a while for the step pedometers to get good,
right,
that they'd be able to do the same sort of thing based on electrochemistry with your body to be able to predict where your blood sugar is. You just using the iWatch itself.
Wow.
Because it's got electrodes in the back.
Oh, yeah.
It does, for a mild electrical shock.
Don't take that watch off. Buy what I told you to buy.
That's right, exactly. When you walk by the things in the Keurig 3.0, it'll buzz your arm to remind you it's time for coffee. No, drink your coffee now.
Wow.
Yeah.
You buy from us. We paid an extra $1 to shock you every time you walk by the store if you don't buy.
It's true.
You have 30 seconds to buy or we shock you.
It's only a matter of time, George Orwell. It's coming true. Well, I think it's time for me to tell you who we are again because you probably have no idea. What have I stumbled on? You're saying to yourself. It's the Catholic Underground. Why? I'm Father Chris Decker, and I'm your host. Father Ryan Humphreys also joins us. He's via Skype. He's in Natchitoches, Louisiana. You know that place up there in North Louisiana. Kathleen Lee joins me, as she always does. Jeff Blackwell also joins us. And Katie Richard, you don't see her, but she's there.
Yeah.
She's like the angel, just kind of hovering over your shoulder. Except she's not an angel, because angels are their own species, and she is human.
I was going to say she's like the flu.
What?
You feel the... What? It was... I mean, you feel the
Not
symptoms.
in a mean way.
You feel the symptoms, but you don't ever see the disease.
It's like the Blair Witch, but in a nice way.
It's all right.
You're gonna get a tap to the head.
In a good
or
way.
Shock to
In
the
a
arm,
good way.
Kathleen. So all of you, all of Kathleen's relatives who are going to watch this on Catholic Life Television, call her, see what's
Yeah.
up, because obviously something's going. Anyway, all right. We always talk about time on this show, not just because we have a time frame to keep, but because we are Catholics and we are concerned about the glorification of God through time. And one of the ways that we do that is the liturgical time. And there's always a question that comes out after we cross the threshold of Eastertide, of Christmastide, into ordinary time. And ordinary time, I've heard it described in so many different ways. In fact, in my own parishes, they tend to think of ordinary time as the time in which nothing can happen. You know, Father, we can't do anything like this, this, and this. But there's actually a reason behind this word, even though it's a bit of a misnomer.
Yeah, and it's really only English that does this, because when we say ordinary, in English we mean boring or regular or, ordinary. But in fact, what we're talking about is ordinal in terms of counting or numbered time. So a better way to translate it in English would be numbered time or ordinal time, or as I say in my parish, Sundays throughout the year.
Per annum in Latin, right?
Per annum, right, yeah. And so in the revised calendar, which changed around 1970 or so, a season of pre-Lent that we called Septuagesima was kind of summarily thrown out. And there's a whole big discussion about whether that should have been our case or not. But if you don't have pre-Lent and you count Christ the King as a solemnity separate from the rest of ordinary time or time throughout the year, there are 33 Sundays, counting the baptism of the Lord as the first Sunday. And so that number, for obvious reasons, is good and symbolic. 33 Sundays, 33 years in the life of Christ. And so it has some value. And in fact, there is a certain tradition of doing it this way in certain points in history. What a lot of us don't know is that there is another practice that makes a lot of sense as well. And it's still used frequently for those people who are celebrating the traditional Latin Mass, those people who are keeping the old calendar. And that practice has a time after Epiphany and a time after Pentecost, a maximum of 7 Sundays after Epiphany, and I think 29 after Pentecost, 24 after Pentecost. And the logic is that there are 6 Sundays maximum between Epiphany and pre-Lent, Septuagesima. And you took those Sundays to meditate upon the mysteries of Christmas and Epiphany, because that season is short. And so it gives you time to think about, in a less intense way, what those feasts are about, the coming of Christ at the end of time. And so time after Epiphany would have been meditating on the person of Christ, his entry into the world, so on and so forth. And then in a parallel way, the time after Pentecost is for meditating on the Trinity and the mission that the Holy Spirit gives us. And of course, that makes sense to do that throughout the entire year. And so there was no such thing as a separate season that didn't have any specific mission, that was an ordinary time or just kind of a throwaway season. That simply didn't exist before. And of course, this happens in English because the word in the homonym is difficult to deal with. And so some people, including myself, have tried to inject some meaning into the season by saying, well, ordinary time is when we become saints and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it always feels a little rudderless. It feels like you're just killing time for half the year until you get to the good stuff, when the non-green Sundays come up. And so that's kind of the background. There are 2 very different ways of thinking about it. The wisdom of the old is shown. The wisdom of the new is being shown. And of course, we in English have a little difficult time because the words are homonyms, and that's confusing. But it's just good to point out where we stand, because the priest never has the time to say this in a sermon.
Right.
People would be balancing their checkbooks or simply passing out in the pews by this moment in the sermon. So it's just good to say. And so I just wanted to throw that out there and say, here's where we stand with ordinary versus the way we used to deal with non-festival time.
And it is a really interesting thing, because I've often wondered, as I preach the homilies in ordinary time, that there are some very distinct connections, of course, with the seasons that precede them. Like right now, in this little portion of the beginning of ordinary time, following the Epiphany, we're talking about the call of Simon Peter, the call of James and John, the call of Jonah the prophet, and how there really is kind of a little encapsulation of things to meditate upon. And I often wonder if those were connected in some way to the seasons that came before them. And I'm sure the answer is yes. But yeah, I often get that. Actually, I have to be honest with you, and you may be the same way, Father, I tend to look forward to ordinary time because I know it's a day that I can stand down from yellow alert. I can go,
Yeah.
okay, I can just if I need to, I can say the Gloria. I can move kind of matter of factly through the liturgy, because sometimes those non-green times, as they should be, are times of kind of heightened awareness. But really, would you say, Father, for the Catholic, there's no real time where we shouldn't be at heightened awareness? Like Paul said this weekend, time is running out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, every Sunday should be a day of festival.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't be able to look and say this Sunday doesn't matter. It's only the ninth Sunday in ordinary time. And I think most of us realize that. I mean, none of us say that Wednesday and Sunday are the same day. We realize that Sunday is a bigger day than a random other day of the week.
Right.
But it's having a proper way to contextualize where we are. And what it's kind of become is, like I said, the throwaway Sundays or the rudderless Sundays, where you're like, oh, the Father's just going to talk about whatever he feels like because, it's nothing else to talk about. It's ordinary time. And then, of course, the revised lectionary has made that difficult too, because you end up with 5 or 6 Sundays where you have the exact same metaphor.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
The kingdom of God is like exactly what we talked about last week and the week before that and the week before that. And the priest, as the preacher, goes, for the love of God, can I have something other than a metaphor about gardening? It's in the old calendar, you didn't have that kind of consecutive week after week after week repetition, and so it becomes difficult when you've got 5. Actually, at one point it's 7 consecutive weeks of gardening metaphors about the kingdom of God, and it's enough to make a priest throw himself off a bridge. Just so you know,
No, don't do that.
Very, very frustrating, and it's annoying for the people because the priest is basically saying, "Hi, gang, we're going to talk about exactly the thing we talked about last week, and it ain't going to stop there."
Well, Father, I can say this. If you use that hyperbole in your ordinary time homilies, then I think your parishioners would be pretty much glued to the pulpit. So,
after a fashion, my people hear my preaching a lot. I think they're not going to be glued to anything I say. They've heard it all.
Yeah, one of the things that I do appreciate is when the Bread of Life discourse goes kind of verse by verse for a whole bunch of weeks.
That is nice.
And so you really can dive into the Eucharistic mystery, especially when it gets to John 6, verse 66. Look it up. All right, let's move on a bit, shall we? To Pope Francis and Cardinal Burke. In fact, the way that it's often portrayed is that they're kind of head to head, like those two helmets crashing at the Super Bowl. But are they really? Computer says no, Father.
It does say no. It seems that the drama mongers have multiplied since Pope Francis arrived on the scene, and anyone who says anything that doesn't 100% line up with what the Pope says is somehow considered at odds with him. In fact, Pope Francis, like Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict before him, spoke recently about the necessary role that the genius of women, I love that phrase, the genius of women has to play in the church. Well, several days later, Cardinal Raymond Burke spoke about the detrimental, quote, feminization of the liturgies of all the sacraments. And the two are speaking about entirely different things. But of course, in the papers, it's like these two hate each other and they're going to steal each other's toenails if they get a chance. But what Pope Francis is talking about is the institutional church's governing structures.
Yeah.
The institutional church's pastoral outreach, and especially the methodology, the way in which we go about doing these things, all of which are directed toward us. They're directed toward our salvation. They're directed toward you and me and the church. And because they're directed toward us, we need a blend, a complementarity of masculine and feminine efforts, because this is who we are as human beings, just as there is a blend of spiritual and physical efforts, or visible and invisible efforts.
Right.
And so everybody agrees, Cardinal Burke and everybody, that there needs to be a masculine and a feminine aspect to the way the church organizes herself, governs herself, teaches, pastors, ministers, etc.
Absolutely. In fact, I know, Kathleen, we talk about that quite a bit, that there is very much of an importance of recognizing that the church is, the bride of Christ is male and female. It's us.
Yeah.
And that, of course, has to be reflected in some way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what makes different what Cardinal Burke is talking about is he is talking specifically about the worship of the church. the sacraments, the liturgies, which are directed, if you'll remember from your reading, toward God and not toward us. We receive some benefit from experiencing those things, but the liturgy of the church is directed toward God first. And so that worship is structured, directed, and modeled by Jesus. And it's placed in the hands of the male clergy, not because males are better than females, but because this is how Jesus has established it. And throughout history, that God-centric work has always ended up being fairly masculine. And the church has thrived in the midst of that. Now, you have to remember that's balanced by all the devotional life of the church, which is very, very feminine, because that devotional life is meant to be a combination of offering our prayer to God, but also edifying us. And so you have this kind of interesting complementarity where the worship of the church directed toward God is very masculine, and the worship of the devotion of the church and the devotion of the laity, which is oriented toward God and toward us, is feminine. And so there's the complementarity that the two have. Well, in the last 50 years, what's happened, and we've talked about this before, is that everything's been squashed into one. The Mass and the devotions and the novenas and the prayers and everything has all got to be squished together. And so what you end up with is this very confusing mishmash where you don't have a chance for this to be about God and this to be about me and this moment to be about teaching and that moment to be about sanctification. And they all each have their proper place. You just have this big blob of stuff. And it's sort of like saying, well, okay, I'm going to eat dinner just by putting it all in the blender together. And I'm talking about my steak, my potato, my pie, my drink, all of it in the big blender, and it doesn't make it better. But that's what's happened, is that instead of having these separate services, we've blended it together. And what Cardinal Burke is saying is that that's been detrimental because we've lost touch with the aspect of directly toward God. We have not lost all the devotional stuff. That's what's taken over. But in doing so, we've lost touch with the masculine principle of we should turn and orient and direct ourselves toward God. And so what he's saying is not in any way at odds with Pope Francis or any of the other theologians. What he's saying is that everything should have its place and everything should be in its place. And what we've lost in the last 50 years is the proper complementarity where the masculine and the feminine both work in tandem. What we've had is the feminine has taken over, the masculine has been lost, and now we have no complementarity. And that's what he's basically saying. And so at the end of the day, he's not really trying to punch anybody in the gut. He's just saying it in a way that offends people because people nowadays are really good at being offended.
Yeah, and so I guess as we listen to the train pass.
Yes, we appreciate the trains. They're beautiful.
There are two questions that come to mind. Okay, shouldn't the Mass be both God-centric and us-centric? Is there?
In a very real sense, no. The Mass should be God-centric, and while we can receive a benefit from being present for it, it really is about God. It's sort of like, let's say, Father, I'm going to attend the Catholic Awards and you're going to win the award, of some sort, and I'm going to applaud for you and I'm going to derive some benefit from seeing you there. I'm going to be edified by you receiving the award. But at the end of the day, this is your night. And while I may be blessed by it, it's your night. And I shouldn't insert myself into it to say, but I want some of this attention. It's your night. And it's the same thing with the Mass. The Mass should be oriented toward God, and whatever I receive secondarily from that is great. But there are separate things that the Lord has given us, like the Liturgy of the Hours, like the Rosary, that are meant to be us-centric.
Right. And then, of course, deriving from that, community life, the parish picnic and things like that.
Absolutely, yes.
Those are meant to flow from the liturgy in such a way where we have experienced, and this is Catholic Theology, Acts of the Apostles 101, where we have experienced a worship of God together as a unit, and then we come down from the liturgy into parish life, into the devotional life, and into the parish picnic and all those things.
Yeah, and that's the Christian community where we encourage one another, we exhort one another, where all the spiritual and corporal works of mercy take place, where the virtues grow. All of those things are very us-centric in the very, very best sense of the word. And so when they flow naturally from an authentic worship of God, it all makes sense. But when you have to have the big handshaking and the birthday celebration during Mass, it all kind of falls to pieces.
And so here's the second question is Is there a relationship between this and kind of the numbers we've seen in the past 30 to 50 years?
And this is a point of some contention, but it becomes very hard to say that it's not, that there's not a connection, because church attendance prior to the liturgical adjustments following the Second Vatican Council was somewhere around 90-95%, depending on what part of the country you looked at.
Yeah.
Now, the most recent data I've seen is that average church attendance in the United States is 15% of
My
self-identifying Catholics. So you go from 90% to 15%. Clearly, other things have happened. You know, the 60s have happened, the sexual revolution has
Right, there's
happened.
cultural stuff.
Other stuff has happened, but a number, an adjustment that significant, it becomes nigh on impossible to say that there is not some correlation. You know, because if people don't feel like attending Mass is important, then we say, well, what's changed? And if the
Right.
Mass has changed, then we have to say, what we ought not to say is, let's just put it back and see how that works.
Right.
But what we ought to do is say, something's not right.
Right,
And
that
so
critical
let's-
examination is important. You know?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like if Tim Grimes is about to go to CPE, the most obnoxious way to describe that is courageous personal examination.
Oh,
You've got to look inside.
It's
and
true.
of course, that's what the church is doing now. As religious orders age and as more and more of these kind of things become obvious, we have to say, what do we need to do? How do we respond? This is the signs of the times the Second Vatican Council called us to, so what do we do?
right. And those are always the questions, because the church, as it has been said for so many years, for thousands really, the church is always in need of renewal, always, constantly. And so I think perhaps as we cross the threshold into 2015, 15 years since the beginning of the third millennium, as John Paul II rightly called it, these kinds of questions are important rather than just kind of moving forward without any sort of examination, because there is a lot to be said about young people being drawn to the liturgy when it glorifies God. You know, young people are certainly drawn to the liturgy. Some might say now in a more traditional style. I'm sure that there are masses where there is contemporary music and things like that does glorify God, that does worship God. And Kathleen, you as a person who have done music ministry for a while could probably speak to that a little bit. That there is contemporary music in Mass, but it's all about the orientation that draws people in.
That's always so difficult. Like when you talk about having a youth, a quote unquote youth Mass, and I did a lot of that for a couple years, and there was a lot of growth and understanding about what the liturgy is and why do we call it, why do we call it a youth Mass? Why don't we just call it the Mass, man? Like, and not call it like, why does it have to be pigeonholed? But there's a lot, when you talk about liturgical music, are we having, solos in Mass with contemporary music, and what does that detract from the Mass? A lot, because then it does become about one person.
Right.
And then it becomes, well, if this person is good, well, then I have a good experience in the Mass. If this person is bad, then I have a bad experience in the Mass. And it's based off a human being who is flawed.
Story of my homiletic life, lady.
Who's going to be good, who is going to be bad sometimes. And it's like, if I base off of this one person, if it's us-centric, well, then it's bound to fail.
Yeah.
But if I base it off of God, if I base my experience off of what I
and
should
it becomes
be
throwaway. If it's us-centric,
yes.
I can say, well, maybe I'm just not going to go to the show this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So.
Well, very good. Let us know what you think. Backchat at CatholicUnderground.com. You always have thoughts. Won't you tell us them? Backchat at CatholicUnderground.com. But now, Jeff, we're going to go to that part of the show that we often like to call
the CU Pick of the Week.
Alrighty. Okay. Pick of the week. Let's round table it. Jeff's been feeling a little under the weather. And so your pick of the week is directly related to your condition, such as it is.
I know we could say cruddy on the radio.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
I don't know. This thing came on like overnight 3 weeks ago, and I'm still, I'm catching a healing. How's that?
From your pick of the week?
No. Well, these help a lot. I was going to, Burt's Bees is my pick of the week. And they're called throat drops. They're not really cough drops, but they're honey flavored. They actually contain about 35% honey. And they really have helped soothe the throat and help me out. Got a little touch of eucalyptus oil in there and some menthol, but mostly honey. I just really,
They're recommended by 4 out of 5 Jeff Blackwells who use cough drops.
Yeah. Oh, we can do this.
There you go.
Definitely.
Recommended by 4 out of 5 dentists who choose.
So
to use them.
anyway, I just and they're not very expensive too, and that's the nice thing about them. And just carry a couple in the pocket, and
That reminds me, there's a documentary on Netflix about Burt's Bees that I've been meaning to
Yeah.
watch.
yes,
That's a complete non sequitur. You're watching the Catholic Underground. Rolling on.
so that's simple. That was it. Not medicine. It's just something to really help the old throat out.
That said, hey, sometimes the best picks of the week are the ones you can get at the drugstore. Just something simple. I love a good. My pick of the week should have been a disposable fountain pen that I found at the drugstore. For the first time in 50 years, I found a disposable fountain pen at the drugstore.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. Kathleen, what's your pick of the week?
Well,
So
as
glad you asked.
Yeah. Back to me. Okay. So this week, as we were on the march, we went to of course, Matt Maher, beautiful Catholic musician, does a concert, and the night before the march.
Yep.
And so this year we went, and there was a band that was playing called Rend Collective, and I was like, wow, a wide open mouth the whole time. I was like,
Oh, and there was no sound coming out of your mouth.
No.
As it was just open.
it was
Gaping.
phenomenal. Okay, Rend Collective is a band that's out of Ireland, and it's a group of 5. It's 4 guys and a girl. They're young adults, and what happened? They're not Catholic, but that's okay.
They're Irish.
Well, let me tell you, some of the stuff they were saying about heaven, I was like, I think you're Catholic, dude.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's this, these 5 young adults, and they started in Northern Ireland as a young adult ministry, and they just have phenomenal lyrics, and they play like these just weird instruments. I mean, they got this crank. I mean, and it's one of those bands where they play every instrument. So like
Wow.
they just scoot around and play. I mean, there's
So
like
they're virtuosi.
Yes, and they're so energetic and so prayerful. Like he just, and all of his lyrics, it's very Irish because all of his lyrics are very. I felt like there was a movement that I was joining. I was like, yes, this is
that's
awesome.
right, yeah.
But it's great lyrics, beautiful, beautiful lyrics. And the lead singer, was just so cool. I mean, just what he was saying about worship. And about he was, because he was like, this is not even half of what you're gonna experience, after this. So he's like, so put all you have into it right now. And I was like, what? It's beautiful, and their music is super fun. So they have a couple of albums I downloaded. The Art of Celebration is, I think, their newest one, but the one that I like the best is I think it's called Campfire.
Did you hear that, Father Ryan? The name of their album is Ars Celebrandi.
Well, I heard it. I'm looking at their website right now.
I think
And
you would like
dress,
them.
They dress like Macklemore.
Yes.
And according to my fancy computer, there is a Spotify
Yes.
channel there.
But Campfire is the one. It's their not their latest, but their second latest. And it's those last 2 I downloaded. I've been listening to, and it's just phenomenal.
Very
Great
neat.
stuff.
I'm always on the lookout for a new group, Kathleen.
You'd like them a lot, I think.
Yeah, I probably would. Are they quasi-emo? Just a little?
A little bit, but
Yeah, I
they're
can
too
handle
cool to be emo though. Like they
I
pull
see.
it off way. I
Do-
mean, like it's natural cool.
Do they come off as perhaps like Irish hipster then?
Yeah.
There it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
You'd like them a lot.
I would like to drink a Guinness with them.
Yes, you would. Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty, so Father Ryan, your pick of the week.
My pick of the week is somewhat unusual in that it is really not for kids. It's not for family. It's a book by Stephen King.
Oh, my.
Called The Stand. Now, there are a number of really, really good Catholic apocalypse books. The best of all is Father Elijah by Michael O'Brien. The Stand, while it has some one incredibly disturbing graphic, sexual scene, and has a lot of nasty language, is a remarkably Catholic book that does a shockingly good job of describing a very realistic way of in which God works. It's a remarkably theologically sound book. And I just finished reading the extended version and had never realized just how theologically sound it is. Now, it has some problems. It's got some errors and so on and so forth. But for those people who are kind of looking for something that is a little darker, a little heavier, and are a little anxious about the end of the world, or even not. It's a
Or even
remarkably it's a remarkably good book, and it does open your eyes to the fragility of life. And I, for one, am very, very happy to have read it. As I said, it does have a few moments of graphic sexuality and has some pretty nasty language throughout. It's very just natural language, but I recommend it strongly for those people who are adults and who are kind of interested in a bit more of a grittier, heavier read to give them a kind of an appreciation of what we have. It's a remarkable book. And that in combination with Father Elijah, in combination with Voyage to Alpha Centauri, make for really, really hopeful reading. Even though they are fairly dark topics.
So again, this is a mature audiences only pick of the week.
Yes, it is a mature audiences only pick of the week, but it's a remarkably good pick of the week, and it's very inexpensive on the Amazon.
Yeah, my inner censor is going off, so I won't be reading it. I'm scared already just looking at the name Stephen King on the rundown. I can't do it. Anyway,
I'll remove it for you right there.
my pick of the week is actually an Instagram channel or an Instagram user. I woke up the other morning having it was a difficult day before, and it was looking to be a difficult morning, and the Instagram user, the Oodles of Doodles, is a young woman who every day in her journal writes a scripture verse or some other kind of aphorism or whatnot in her journal, and she does it in that Kathleen, that scripty, girly style that's really kind of neat.
Yeah, huh?
That doesn't look like a St. Joseph's Academy prom T-shirt.
Okay.
Which is
All
my
right.
number one rule of graphic design.
All right, I gotcha.
Don't make it look like that. Anyway, so I read this and it was from Ecclesiastes. It was a beautiful, beautiful passage, and it was exactly, of course, what the Holy Spirit wanted me to read that morning, and the rest of the day was great because I was rooted in the scriptures. So she is my pick of the week. She and her artwork, and that's my pick. Jeff, we always thank those who support us. Always.
Yes, we do. Those, I guess, benefactors.
Yes.
That take care of us here by donating at CatholicUnderground.tv. Also, audibletrial.com/Catholic Underground is a underwriter. I was trying to think of what I'm supposed to say there.
That's right. That's it. They are.
okay.
They are, in fact, underrouter.
Audible Trial.
Underrouters.
audibletrial.com/Catholic Underground.
Yes, indeed. And if you're watching us on CatholicUnderground.tv, you notice that we've got kind of a new look to CatholicUnderground.tv, the webpage. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. You can take a look at our brand new blog as well. You can get there. Just go to CatholicUnderground.tv and be tempted with some blog. For all of the show notes that accompany this episode and everything on the podcast, if you want to find out more about our apostolate, go to CatholicUnderground.com. That's the way to do it. We're also on social media. You can find out more about that. Father Ryan's Church is online at minorbasilica.org. He's at FR Humphreys on Twitter. Thank you, Father Ryan.
It's been my distinct pleasure.
Indeed it has, and it's been ours to receive you. Jeff Blackwell is the tech director for the CU. He's the ruling despot at the Blackwell Communications Group. He's at Jeff Blackwellis on Twitter. Thank you, Jeff.
It's a pleasure, Father.
Kathleen Lee is der Faith Ninja, and she is also on the Twitters at KathleenYABR. Thank you, Kathleen.
Anytime.
And Katie Richard is, she's there, and she also dresses up at kids' birthday parties, but as a giant cat. You know me, I'm Father Chris Decker. Follow me on Twitter at Digital Catholic. Join us on the interwebs for more from the Catholic Underground. As always, thanks for tuning in, hanging out with us. We're Catholic Underground, we're Faith Gone Digital. We will see you next time.
From the Catholic Underground.
Bye.
All right, to all of you out there in Podcastington, we thank you. Thanks, Ryan, and all the ships at sea.
Cheers.
And also Ryan in the chat there.
Oh, okay.
I meant to say Ryan's phrase. He said, "Who among us doesn't dress like Macklemore?" Really. Didn't get a chance to say it though. Well, I mean, I don't wear the black A shirt very often. No.
Well, they dress less like Macklemore and more like people who are trying to sell old-fashioned shaving equipment, at conventions. But That was too complicated to get to. So.
All right. Sorry. I was texting. I admit it.
Yeah, I didn't think that joke was that funny. I was like, man, he's completely taken up with me. It really wasn't meant to be funny at all. It was just, sure.
Yeah, one of my brother priests was asking me if I know the confraternity of Catholic clergy.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, I do. In fact, I'm kind of quasi-connected with them, sort of. I'm not a member. I'd like to be, but I know Father Trigilio.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to turn off the feeds, all you YouTubers.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.